What's up? What's up, Cuzzo?
Oh man, it's all good, man. I'm happy to see you again. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to see you too, man. Where are you? Are you over the pond? Or are you here in the States?
Yeah, man. I'm in London right now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you in LA?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles. You bring up it's a really interesting question because I think it's especially growing up in LA. I grew up in the Crenshaw district, South Central Los Angeles. They now call it South LA.
Mm,
And you guys might be familiar with it, Boys in the Hood, right? That's probably
yeah.
people over there might remember that. That's the neighborhood. And you start thinking a lot of some of the oppressive things that you're talking about that you face now, like the like educational, like not necessarily that the teachers are bad, but then the
Mm,
resources. Like I couldn't take my books home as a kid, whereas I know people in other neighborhoods were able to take their books home. There are all these
mm,
other different hurdles. And so the dream as a kid was to be able to leave that neighborhood and make better for myself. And there
mm,
is this enormous guilt, having played professional ball and doing some other stuff and whatever. The idea is that you want to do better. I think when my parents came to America, that was them doing better for whatever
mm,
their situation is. So my parents left during the Biafra War, and so they came to America for their better. And so I think the guilt and I call it poisonous guilt because when you try to do well, there's this, do better for yourself rather. There's this idea that somehow you just said it, you lose your black card, like, oh, you sold out. And you're like, hold
mm,
on, what was I supposed to do? Like, what was like, just stay in this, in this oppressive, environment. And not that the people, and I think sometimes there's a lost translation in that if if the neighborhood is oppressive because of all of these systemic things that have happened that has not allowed it to flourish, then somehow you leaving is saying that they are bad. But the people in the
mm,
neighborhood aren't bad. It's all of the different types of red tape that you got to cut through. So I think about like redlining, for example, that happened in the
mm.
States. I don't know if it happened there in the UK, but you think about some of the stuff that were written in to the documents as far as where blacks could live and where blacks couldn't live and the types of things that just happen in those areas. Or, for example, my neighborhood, I just think about from a health standpoint. Let's just go from a health standpoint. On King Boulevard, where I live, where I grew up, there were three McDonald's within a 2 mile strip. Like in a straight line, there were three
Man.
McDonald's. There was a Jack in the Box, a Burger King. I mean, literally, you could just call it fast food row. And you're like, man,
Mm,
like I want to eat healthy. And I remember moving, after playing, football. I came back home and came back into the house that I grew up in. And I remember going to the grocery store. Now, in the suburbs where I was living, there's a Whole Food here, Whole Food there. You look at all these nice grocery stores. I remember going to the grocery store in my neighborhood and again, this is not me putting down the neighborhood. This is me putting down the system. And I think I want to constantly say that because, oh man, I can't believe you said that because people take it personally. And it's like,
yes,
you
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about you talking about me. No, I'm not talking about you. This has nothing to do. I grew up
Hmm.
here too. So don't try to call me
Yeah,
out like that. But I walked
yeah.
into, I swear to you, it's right off of King Boulevard. And there's this grocery store. And usually they say if you want to eat healthy, you walk the perimeter of the grocery store. And so that's where
Yeah.
you get all your meats and your produce. You walk the perimeter. Stay away
Mm,
from the aisles. I walked not
okay.
only the perimeter and I walked out. I'm talking about all processed foods. It was a small section of produce, a small section of meat, probably not even good quality meat. And I'm thinking, well, no wonder there's health issues in that are plaguing my neighborhood. And I remember I said, I want to talk to the manager. I'm sure they're thinking, who the hell do you think you are? What authority do you have to ask for the manager? I'm like, why can't I find organic food here? Why can't I find better options? Like, literally, you have Intamin donuts on the outside? We're looking at, I thought this stuff was supposed to be on the inside. You got all this stuff. Well, the people here, God is my witness, this is what was said. The people here, this is what they want to buy. This is what they want to eat. No, this is what they want to eat because this is what you're giving them. This is what you're putting in front of them. And so, anyways, I digress. And then so I think your initial one, like, are Black people allowed to leave the ghetto? Yes, because the ghetto isn't the neighborhood. The ghetto is moving outside of this invisible restriction that says, if I live here, I mean, I know that my kids aren't going to have better access to schools. Like, there's no reason why the school system in Beverly Hills should thrive better than that of, like, you mean to tell me that all the people live in Beverly Hills are just flat out smarter? They're just flat out smarter, right? Like, no, because they have resources, right? And so if those resources have been taken away from my neighborhood, then I'm going to go out and I'm going to get it.
Do you know what you just said is like, this is exactly the discussion I wanted to have, and I really appreciate your perspective on it. I know I've heard, I can't remember who it was, but there's an African American actor who did this, had this whole campaign about food deserts and how you can go into, specific, like, wide areas where it's really almost impossible to get fresh food within a certain radius in this area. And it's always obviously more impoverished communities. And so what I find though is that there are real problems there, but then those problems become internalized because people need a way to cope with that. So, to try and make the best of a bad situation, you start to say, instead of saying, I only have access to processed foods, you start saying, well, that's what we do. We just eat processed foods.
Yeah.
You start to internalize it. Then someone says around you, I want to eat organic. You're like, who's this guy that wants to go eat organic? Right. Look at organic Oliver over here. He wants to go eat vegetables.
Good for us. You too good. You too good for us, right?
Exactly.
You can't eat this fry, or you can't eat this. Like, come on, man. It's not. I just want to make healthy options. I can't make healthy options. Healthy options is not an option for me, right? Okay, got it.
For real.
Good.
Well, one question I want to ask you is, like you're the picture of what is essentially a successful man in America, let alone Black man in America. One can see, like, you clearly a good looking guy, you've studied, you've like played ball, you've made your money, you're well spoken, like all of these things are handed to you. Do you find that you get celebrated by your people, in a way that makes you feel like you are embraced, or do you feel like you kind of have to sit on the sidelines a bit, or do you feel like it's intermittent? How do you see like your relationship with your wider Black community in America?
I feel like I'm embraced. I think it's embraced in a different way. And sometimes it comes with a little bit of jab, but to me it feels more like a locker room. They're going to jab you a little bit, like, man, but I mean, whenever I've come back, especially when I'm with my friends that I grew up with, it's nothing but love. And I think that's the way it should be, right? I think but then you have your haters, you have the people who but I think that's in life. I think that's cross culture. It doesn't matter what color you are, that in every race, you're going to have people who are genuinely just have a hard time. Even in marriages, there are going to be spouses who have a hard time looking at the other spouse having success. And they go, hold on, where do I fit in? And a lot of times what that has to do with is jealousy. And I want you to get this because there's a big difference. I think when you have envy, you're still likely to get love. Envy is wanting to be like someone else. And I translate that in my own head as being inspired. I was inspired by Muhammad Ali growing up, by Michael Jackson, Oprah Winfrey, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan. These people inspired me. I wanted to be like them. That's envy. Jealousy is wicked because jealousy is a perceived threat to a valued relationship. What's the valued relationship? The valued relationship is the neighborhood that we came up in, right? You and I grew up in the same neighborhood. That's the relationship. If you somehow go off and make it big, that might be considered a threat to the valued relationship, to the area that we grew up in, or just one-on-one. If you and I are best friends, I think that if you go out and now all of a sudden I'm friends with Denzel Washington or something like that, Are you friends with Denzel, by the way? No, I'm not friends with Denzel. I'm a fan.
Okay, let's just.
Yeah. So, but the jealousy would be that you would perceive Denzel as a threat to our valued relationship. So then you start to sabotage the relationship. Oh, you think you better because you hanging out with Denzel. So you start to wear on me and you start to separate, or you start to give me attitude or whatever, or you just start trying to pick on me because you see that I've developed whatever, a working relationship, a friendship relationship. And that's what I typically see in humans, period. There are people who are going to be inspired and still want to give you love. There are going to be other people who are jealous because they see a perceived threat. So they're not jealous of you. That's always commonly mistaken. They think, oh, like, if you and I are cousins and you now all of a sudden, you see this new friend and now you and I don't talk anymore. I'm not jealous of you. I'm jealous of that person because that person I see as a threat to you and I's relationship. And so that's jealousy. It's a perceived threat to a valued relationship. So to answer your question, I get a lot of love. I get haters, but I get a lot of love whenever I go back home, whether it's the people who mentored me, whether the people who I grew up with, or even too, some of the guys, I grew up with that's still on the streets that say, man, I'm so glad you didn't do what I did. Like, like that to me is empowering. That's to me is the biggest form of congratulations. You know what I mean? Like even in their own, situation, they can still take time to say, you know what, I'm so proud of you. And I'm glad you didn't take the route that I took.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you still got time for another question, I just want to ask, so like you're the host on America's Ninja Warrior, right?
Yeah, and that's on our version. You guys have UK Ninja Warrior. Yeah.
I don't even know what I was called. Because I don't watch it, but like until they hire you as the presenter, I watched it. I ain't that concerned. But so you're the host of this.
We say host. You guys say presenter. It's host. Okay, it's not presenter.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. You're the host. Okay, you're the host. So this is like a very mainstream show, right? This is which network is it on? Is it NBC or something?
NBC.
Okay. Do you feel like you need to go do projects on Black-owned platforms and to be honest, BET is not even Black-owned anyway, so I don't even know whatever. Yeah. But do you feel like you need to go host Harlem's, local sports day at a school or whatever it is? Do you feel like you have to go do things like that in Black spaces so that you are enriching your community, or are you perfectly within your rights to just say, do you know what? I'm on this mainstream platform. I don't care who's watching. Everybody can watch. I'm the host and it's a big show. So leave me alone.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've not gone out and say, hey, I want to do a Black project or I want to look for Black channels. I feel it's like 8 years later and I still feel like, like somebody pinched me. I'm William Jr. Like to retire from the NFL, then to try to get into TV, and then to start making these opportunities. So you go where the opportunities are, really. And it's not like I don't feel like that about myself, that I have the power to go, I want to work here. Like LeBron can go, I want to go play for the Lakers. I want to go play for this team now. It doesn't work like that in this industry, in the entertainment industry, unless you've got that certain type of clout. And so I don't have that clout. I still find myself as a hard hat, lunch pail type of guy, who's just been extraordinarily lucky and privileged to work in this type of industry. So I've not necessarily pursued it. But when there are people, I do know that because of our lack of representation in entertainment, I know that I am more conscious of when there are interviews about the show or whatever like that, making sure that I am speaking to the Black outlets and making sure that I take that time, because when you look at a red carpet, they'll have all the mainstreams, the big blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the red carpet, when you're exhausted as heck, is when you'll see, the Black outlets, and then you go, man, I'm so tired of being on carpet. I always have to suck it up, because I'm like, it's important, because how do they get they're not going to get the exclusive interview with the Will Smith or the, Meryl Streep, because they're all the way at the end of the carpet.
Wow, that's dope. You really dropped a lot, man. I don't know. I want to say anyway, first of all, I take a look around and I try and find, an example of what it is. So it helps me visualize where I'm trying to go. And, you know, without obviously sounding, you know, too, I don't know, cliche or on the nose, like you're one of those guys in that sense. Like people come up to me when they find out my surname, they're like, "Oh, do you know that so-and-so is, you know, your name? Like there's a guy, you related? Like this guy, he's an NFL player, blah, blah, blah." It's either you or Kabir.
Yeah.
And when I see that, I go, hell yeah, come on, man, Gbaja-Biamila, we do it. Like we big, like we run the world. And so I know how important it is for me to, like, and I'm somebody who prides myself on being fairly, you know, pretty much a self-starter, but even seeing that or hearing that makes me go, yeah, I believe my family is about greatness. I can be about greatness. I can do more. Like one day someone's going to come up to you and be like, "Hey, are you related to this guy? Blah, blah, blah."
Right.
That's the way I see it. I'm like, yo, you know, I can see it visually. I can see it. And what I worry is that for a lot of people, if your story, the story you've been told of yourself and your people is consistently around certain themes, you don't have a vision for like what it looks like to actually be out of it. Like there's always a place for boys in the hood. But what happens when boys make it out the hood? What's that story? What does that look like? Where do I go? What do I check out? Like, what do I, like when you spend so much time figuring out what you don't want to do, you can find yourself in a real vacuum as to what do I do? What do black people do when we get money? And we you know, passing on inheritances and so on. Like
now, let me tell you.
What does that look like?
Don't get me started, man, because I got to get going here. But because I tell you right now that you just hit a little trigger right there for me, because I think it's been one of the biggest lies we've been told, and maybe it's the big lie, because I think what's portrayed on TV is constantly putting us in a position to where we have to just be this consumer mindset. But I suppose that a lot of this consumerism comes from this massive insecurity. And I'm going to point the finger to myself first. So when I came to the NFL, I grew up, my parents didn't buy me no damn Jordans. And I love Jordans. I was a basketball player. I love basketball. And there was this massive insecurity that during the heyday of Michael Jordan, I never owned a pair of Jordans. And so when I signed my first deal with Nike, man, they couldn't send me a T-shirt. I'm like, nope, I don't want any other. I just send me Jordans. That's all I want. Just Jordans. There's hey, Akbar, we got this new shipment in. No, I don't. Just give me Jordans. And so I just collected all of these Jordans. And what I realized was that I was trying to suffocate this feeling of inadequacy, because somehow I thought I was identified with materialism, because like I have no self-worth. Like intrinsically, I didn't feel like I had that self-worth. So that's the insecurity that I think a lot of people, because all that stuff, money doesn't change who you are. It only really highlights who you really are. And so that insecurity shows up even more. You know, like when people get money and they start acting like jerks. It's always been there, but they felt like they didn't have the platform to be that. So when they have it, it empowers them to feel like I can be more of this jerk that I am. And so I think it's the same thing. When you have money, more of your insecurities come out. So it's not a cultural thing, because if you go back into just our own ancestors and like, it wasn't a thing to do the diamonds and all those things. We have flashiness. Sorry about that. Definitely our culture, you know, we're ostentatious, but not to the point where you see guys like just the chains and the grills and I gotta have Bentleys and I gotta do all, and it's like, and we don't think about this generational wealth. We don't think about passing it down to the next and then being able to empower the people in our neighborhood, or just the people around us. We just become this big show, you know, like this big show, like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And I suppose now it's going to be a lot harder because we are in a look at me culture, a la social media and all this other kind of stuff that just puts the attention on ourselves. But I love what you're saying, in that there is no real direction or vision as far as what does that look like once you've made it out of this oppressive environment. Like, right, there's still going to be all these other obstacles that you're going to have to go through. But once you get out this environment that they try to contain you in, and you move out, what does that look like? Back in the 80s, I know people don't like the name now, but back in the 80s, Bill Cosby was a massive hit. But you know, this is how bad it was. This is how bad the oppression was. Bill Cosby was a major hit, and yet the common tone that you heard around the Bill Cosby show is like, that's not realistic. That's not how Black people really live. Like, can you imagine? Just stop and think about that. The fact that they would show a successful doctor and lawyer, Black family living up in wherever, you know, in New York, in the brownstones, and just doing really well. That was not considered realistic. And we couldn't accept that as realistic. It was just fantasy. Don't buy in. And that became like, oh, you trying to live that Bill Cosby. Like, that was like, to me, I look at that as an older person, as a kid, I subscribe to, that would never be my lifestyle. Like, just stop and think about that. I would see something that would be a sign of success, or this model that they were creating on television. And yet it was just like, it was great to fantasize and watch it because they were Black, but never think for once that could be you. I can't tell you how many times I heard that. I wonder how many people here have heard that's on here, and they heard that Bill, you know, like when they watch, they're like, oh, but that's not realistic. Like, why wouldn't it be realistic?
But to be honest, like I'm in the entertainment industry, and it's still the same sort of story here. Like, a lot of the time, if you're trying to tell a version of your story, you're usually having to explain it to a middle-class white person, and they get to decide as to what they believe people will believe about your story. Yeah. So if you tell them this is actually what my story is, they'll go, I don't know, like, maybe it needs to be more gritty. Like, I told the story.
Yeah, that's what they want, because that, and for us, we've been tricked to taking more pride in our grimy situation. And then we want to wear that, like, I'm from the hood, like, you know, and look, I'm the same person. I'm not gonna lie. I'm from the hood. I'm from the gutter, and I'm still here. You know, like, there's that. Oh, well, hold on. Like, we highlight that part, not like, hey, look, how about highlighting the fact that, you know, that was my past, but this is where I'm going. Not alienating your past, but we somehow like keep telling the same story over and over and over again, because that's considered a real experience, as if making it out isn't a real experience. And again, not making it out. I just want to keep clarifying. It's not making out of the neighborhood as if the people are bad, because the people aren't bad. Like, the people I grew up with, they're not bad people. You know what I mean? It's just like the environment just smells like, I gotta move. I can't do the same things I want to do, you know? Or if I do try to do some of the same thing, it's a hassle. You know, it's a hassle.
Yeah. Environment is very important. So I feel you 100% on that one, man.
You know,
I really appreciate it.
I'll say something else too. You know, given what's happened in our world right now, I've noticed something. I don't know if this is other people's experience. And I'm sure people will probably start to unfollow me after I say what I'm going to say. But you know what I've noticed, and I'm trying to make sense. I'm thinking out loud right now, is that I don't usually get, when we talk about police, you know, like, you're getting bullied by the cops and they keep messing with you, and you know, harassment, police harassment. You know, I think about all the times I've ever gotten harassed by the cops. One time happened in Orange County, California. They pulled me over just for no reason. But all the other times have been in my neighborhood, in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And I wonder why that is. You know what I mean? Like if you're in an affluent neighborhood, maybe maybe this person knows somebody, or you know, you kind of second guess it. Or if you're, you know, like if you're getting harassed in let's say in an affluent neighborhood, you know, let me not even start to speak code. An affluent neighborhood, I don't know why this means, but if you think about an affluent neighborhood, why is an affluent neighborhood mean it's code for white neighborhood, which is the truth? I mean, if you say affluent neighborhood, I don't know an affluent Black neighborhood outside of Baldwin Hills that I grew near where I grew up. But anyways, that's besides the point. But that's where I would get harassed, and I was like, why is that the case? So if I drive a nice car into a Black neighborhood, I'm probably going to get harassed by the cops. Like, who is this person? Why is this person here? That same nice car goes back into, a white neighborhood, then there's a lower level of suspicion. Not to say that you couldn't get messed with, because I surely have, but I feel like I had more incidents, and I wonder if it's like, well, this person wouldn't be able to fight back. This person probably doesn't have resources to call me out on the BS that I'm doing. Now, I think things have changed because cameras are everywhere, which I absolutely love. People, it's like instinct now. Everybody's just pulling out their phone, but I don't even know how I got on that, but you said something that made me think about that.
I think it is valid to this whole discussion, because what it goes to show is that even the environment you find yourself in almost plays a part in how you are translated as a person.
Yeah.
So if somebody sees you and you have money and you are in a less affluent neighborhood, a more impoverished neighborhood, they imagine that the means with which you got that money must be illegitimate, because there aren't opportunities here. They're hyper aware of the fact that real opportunities aren't really here.
So, but stop. That goes back to what we were saying in the beginning then. Like, it's an admission that there aren't real opportunities here. So how'd you get this car? So
exactly.
That then goes back to then, this is why I'm trying to leave, because there are no real opportunities. You're telling me by pulling me over because you believe the same thing I believe, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas if let's say they see you in a nicer neighborhood, they might assume maybe that you are in their head, because they have this narrative maybe of like one of the good ones, or they might say, do you know what? Maybe he's got a white girlfriend or white wife
he's
or something.
An athlete. Don't forget that one. I'm 6'6", so I get that all but
you were actually an athlete though. So in your case, like it makes sense. That's not really profiling. That's just athlete, recognizing.
Yeah. Athlete or entertainer. Which one are you?
But do you know how powerful that is? That they've seen athletes and entertainers make it out of that environment. So that's something they believe. People believe what they've seen before. So if they haven't seen enough of us make it out as dentists, horticulturalists, research scientists, marine biologists, if they haven't seen that, they're less likely to come to their mind or in terms of how they think about us. Now we see white people in a whole spectrum of white people, because you can watch. Yeah, you can watch TV right now and see white people, everything from the trailer park up to the White House, right? And you can see that entire spectrum, everything in between. And so if you see a white person, you're more likely to inquire further as to where they are in life, what they are, who they are, what they're doing, because that range is wider. Whereas for us, it's like, I've only got a few lanes for you and you better fit into one of them. Right. So it's like, if you're not actor or entertainer, then the next one is drug dealer, because I don't see how you're making decent money.
Right, because if I tell you I'm a scientist, you're going to be like, yeah, right. Yeah.
Right? Or you're going to be like, oh, really? You can do science? Like, it's going to be mad patronizing. Right. And it's going to be like you have to explain yourself. Whereas there's literally no reason why you couldn't be a scientist other than.
I will say this. This is part of the thing that one of the things that I'm trying to focus on with this whole Black Lives Matter movement is like, okay, what's the solution now? What's the solution? And start becoming more solution oriented. And part of it for me is just the educational aspect of it. And this goes to what you're saying is that since the Brown versus the Board of Education here in the States, where they integrated schools, they integrated bodies, but they didn't integrate the curriculum, the content of the curriculum. It doesn't have representation of the contributions of African Americans, Asian Americans, Mexican Americans. It doesn't have the same type of representation. So it really still is a very Eurocentric curriculum, which then says to, the white kid growing up in a white neighborhood, like, yeah, why should I see anything differently? Because it's been all about me. The token, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Harriet Tubman, slavery, bye. That's it. That's been our history in our core curriculum. But not even just history, but in the sciences, what's been our contribution in sciences? Surely we have our Black Elon Musk today, but we just don't know it. We don't know. We haven't put it out there. and Bob Johnson. I think about Bob Johnson. People are like, well, how did Bob Johnson come to wealth? I don't know. He just ended up owning a professional team and BET, but we don't really know how he came. What's his story? How did that happen? And because we don't have equal representation in the content, I think some of the same systemic racism continues to happen, because you'll see this young white kid will end up becoming a lawmaker, will end up becoming a police officer, whatever. And these same things that have been built into the fabric of the psyche without them even knowing. It'd be the same thing. I used this scenario before. If you took a pit bull and a chihuahua and you had them charging right at you and you had a gun, which one would you shoot first?
The pit bull, obviously.
Because it's been ingrained in our head, right? That this is dangerous. But either by what we've seen or even by omission, like what we won't even don't even go there. Don't even talk about, don't even bring, the fact that we're not even present in the books says a lot. You know what I mean? So, and then the things that they do talk about doesn't fully represent us. And so until we start to change the core curriculum to have equal representation from a multicultural standpoint, not just a Eurocentric standpoint, then I think we're going to see a lot of the same stuff. I mean, it's inevitable. It's inevitable.
How important do you think it is for Black entertainment to feature a wider range of stories, especially because sometimes, the stories that are the more typical ones are very entertaining. Let's not lie about it.
Let me tell you why, though. I'm going to tell you why. The reason why is because who controls Hollywood? And you got to think, when you're looking at financing, unless we say we're going to collectively come together and finance our own movies and get them out there onto the big screen. But when you look at who's controlling distribution, you look at who's controlling the financing for Hollywood, it's like, if they're going to see a movie, they want to see this type of movie that tells this type of story. That's not a good one. No, we don't like that. Right. So you typically see that the Black movies have a lot of the same threads. It's just a lot of the same threads repeated with different actors and a different story. And we're seeing it in the same type of way. And it's like, imagery is powerful. When you see that over and over again, it just becomes like, oh yeah, this is it. Like, oh yeah, I get it. Like, this is Black culture, but it's not. They've taken I tell my kids this all the time. I show them pictures of Nigeria. And I haven't yet taken them to Nigeria. I'm getting ready to take them there. And I start showing them pictures unlike anything they've ever seen. And even my kids have never been there before. You know what they say? Is that really Nigeria? I show them the most beautiful places in Nigeria. I said, oh, what about this one? No, is that? Because they couldn't believe, because and they're 8 years old, right? I mean, you would think that, it wouldn't affect an 8-year. They're just so young. The brains they're not even warped yet. But the stuff that they see on TV, whether it's National Geographic or whatever it is, they think that Africa too is just this big desert. And I'm first generation Nigerian born in America. And so just think about the power and the imagery that even my own kids would think that when I show them a picture of, it would be like in LA, that if I only, and I tell this to my kids all the time, if I only show the picture of Skid Row, say, this is Los Angeles. Think about over time, people are thinking LA is a crap hole, because that's all they're going to show. And they're going to focus everything and start from Skid Row. And you won't see downtown. You won't see the Staples Center. You won't see Beverly Hills. You won't see the beaches. You won't see anything. Yeah.
Yo, this is the conversation that needs to happen, man. And I really, I take it on myself. I kind of feel like there's a responsibility on myself to even represent a new narrative, because I grew up on Def Comedy Jam as a stand-up, but I look at a lot of the stories we told about ourselves during Def Comedy Jam, and I know the power of what needed to be said at that time. But I also feel like there's no real follow through, because if every part of our narrative is, we are lazy, or we don't really care that much, or we're overly aggressive, or, if you go in a white grocery store, everything nice. You go in a Black grocery store, ain't nothing there. Like that version of our story kind of needs to be changed, but at the same time, I'm very aware that when you're in the entertainment business, people want entertainment, and so you have a bit more of an uphill journey trying
but
to.
I think people can be open to being entertained in different ways. It's just, I know that there's a certain model that's worked, but the same model that has worked and has produced blockbusters have also been telling the same stories in different ways. And I think there just needs to be a fight, I think, in Hollywood to portray blacks in a more diverse way. And I just want to comment on, I think Clark is trying to say something here. Clark A444 says all lives matter. I don't know why that people still say that. But yeah, I don't.
To be honest, no one said anything, and they just came on to say that, so I know they're trolling. So we could just
right. We can ignore. It's just like that's not. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like if you just pop up, like you just like, whoa! I need to say there's a Black Lives going on somewhere. I just need to go and let them know that all lives matter. Like I know that really life is it's lacking meaning.
Yeah, but anyways, but I got to jump off here, man. But it's been real, man. I'm glad that you asked that question. I jumped on. I saw that question. I just kind of heard you go at it, and I thought, man, it's really it's a good conversation. So, but I know there are a lot of people who still feel the guilt. There's an enormous guilt and shame for when you make it financially, and you decide that you want to put yourself in a better neighborhood. That somehow you're a sellout. Somehow you are rejecting your people, and I would just present that it is not a rejection of your people. Your people aren't defined by the neighborhoods that they grow up in. Like, I mean, like you just said, like my friends, my childhood friends are still my childhood friends, regardless of my zip code. And I'm very conscious of supporting Black-owned businesses and these different types of things. But if I know, like for me, like I've got kids, and I know that like one person can't fight the entire system. And I think that makes it very difficult. Like, okay, I'm just supposed to fight the entire system and let my kids, get put in an educational system that I know that they're not going to get the same level of quality, or their teachers are not even going to be the same year to year. Year to year, they're just going to be rotating teachers in and out of it. Like, hold on, there's no consistency here. So,
I appreciate you so much, man. I know you have to go. Thank you for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, brother.
All right, love, man.
Later.